morning to everybody. I'm very pleased to see you again and to speak about what we have done lately in the hope that we will meet the request task that we have as scientific partners. I'm Daniela Borisov. I'm coming from Academy of Economic Studies from Bucharest. And the idea of proposing this title of assessing the compatibility of the transfer process, I think it's useful because it could increase the chances of successful implementation, and also it is necessary because it can give some indication and some guidelines to overpass the difficulty of making the connection between the two instruments that are supposed to be transferred, PIPE and Credinfo, to those 7 regions that make the option to implement these good practices. I'm speaking about the difficulty because there are some, let's say, degrees of complexity in describing this bilateral connection between one good practice and one region to implement this question in terms of diversity of, let's say, specific context and so on. So the idea of the presentation, we were started again with some general consideration about the assessment process. As I said, it is supposed to deal with several stages in which we have thought about planning, monitoring, validation, and evaluation. Today, our focus will be on the first 2. Then the assessment have to deal with the similarities and dissimilarities in describing that connection between one good practice and the region, and also to give some indication to conducting the specific activities in this implementation process. Also to draw attention of which could be the barrier in this transfer. We have, let's say, based our analysis on what we have at our disposal at this moment, meaning for each good practice we have the general description, we have the financial synopsis, we have eventually the presentation which was done in this workshop, and sometimes some very useful comment after the presentation which was given in public. So with this occasion, I will encourage you to give us feedback about what you hear in this kind of public meetings. Okay, so any analysis of compatibility between the origin, source, and the recipient region should base on the success story and eventually the difficulties and the bad points that was, let's say, discovered and could be analyzed after the undertaking of this instrument in the origin country. Okay, so the basic question here is what was good to be transferred and which are the points that should be taken care with very much attention, starting from what didn't went well. So the success also could be an inspiration to describe the list of indicators and to also assess the target which is desired in the developed region. So here you have an example of this kind of indicators, but the specific value which are desired could be at the subject of, let's say, local details in the recipient region. Also interesting in this slide is what the event or the happenings or something that went bad in the first country, the origin country, that can be described of challenges or some list of risks that should be taken care of here or in this process. We are thinking about this risk as something that could interfere in the successful mechanism of causes and effects that work well in the first stage. What can be learned from history? So key learning points and opportunities now could be described in terms of giving indication and being seen as informative data for the proper implementation process right now. Assuming that the partners which were selected, the good practices in order to implement them, should have in mind this kind of question. If everything was done in order to successfully implement this instrument, and what is the difference in time frame or in the context frame or in geopolitical terms as compared to the original instrument, and which are right now or in the time being the key instrument for success, and what could be some barriers or some obstacles that could interfere with the transfer process. Okay, so something about transferring best practices. It's about identifying and learning what was good in the first instance and could be, let's say, borrowed in the second instance. The key factor is the context of the recipient region that should understand very well the inner nature of the financial instrument and its appropriateness with the local conditions. Also the perception in the partner region about the stakeholders' intention and desire to receive from this instrument usage and the list of necessary resources. Also the dialogue between the two parties, which, as I said, is very specific depending on which specific good practice is used and the recipient region. And carrying on through these different stages of the implementation process. Some words about those two practices that were selected to be transferred, PIPE and credit info. I have put it here because there are some big differences in describing these practices in terms of structure, founding sources, the time in which an enterprise is using or is it's using this instrument. For example, for PIPE, it's between 1 or 2 or even 2 years in which an implement is inside this process. And in credit info, the specific dialogue between the SMEs and the whole process of delivering services is only 1 month or the initial stage. And we are concentrating on the first stage, meaning planning, having in view the main benefits of this one, enable to know what should be done. Also having in mind this kind of unexpected event that could interfere in the process, we should try to ameliorate the weak points that were registered in the first usage of that instrument. So a second benefit could be that this planning could help in mitigate and manage the negative effect of the crisis. Also in shaping a list of risk and assumption. Also another one, to improve list of priority that could be an indication of where to start or where to concentrate the resources, and also to help stakeholder to imagine what is desired from this transfer. Some deliverable could be at the beginning a draft note in which the challenges of this process should be addressed, and also another one, this work plan, which is could consist of an outline of activities, schedules, and resources. Some question to bear in mind when designing this work plan. What is the overall time frame for the process? Which are the key milestones in the process? In which stage should we finalize the evaluation and the monitoring plan, and then the evaluation report? Which is involved in the process? What resources are needed? Various kind of resources. Who is responsible for different elements in the planning process, and of course how much will be the total cost. Some points to, let's say, to have in mind, how to involve the stakeholders, and we have thinking about the stakeholder as all the people or the actors who are actually let's say influenced by this implementation process and by the instrument. This consultation of stakeholder could give us some indication about the potential risk, the conflict, the restraint, the opportunity, and the various type of partnership that could be developed through this process, and also some vulnerability of the clients, which in this case are the CMEs. Based on this, let's say, analysis of the stakeholders, we can identify those which are the most crucial, and in this matrix, which is described by two dimensions, one is this importance and the second one is influence. The most important or the crucial ones are that one in the upper and right side of the matrix. Speaking about importance, we could assess the importance in a numerical scale from 1 with low importance to 5, highest important, and also we could have in mind that this could be either positive or negative, or meaning a stakeholder could have, let's say, a positive interest, all the things to work well, or it could have only some, let's say, some not so desired influence. So in this case, we will consider only the absolute model or the only the magnitude of this numerical scale. The rest of the stakeholders also are playing a role, but anyway, the crucial importance is that one in the upper right quadrant. We could start all the process with a very, let's say, deep problem analysis. This is supposed to give us a list of problems and to prioritize them. In developing this phase, we have to understand the causes and the effect mechanism, the restraints. We have to determine the complexity of the problem and also the relationship between the influencing factors, to propose or to at least imagine the way in which the problem should be solved, so searching for a solution, to identify the type and the structure of the partnership and their components, to assess the roles of those stakeholders, and also to give an estimate for the necessary resources. In this stage, it is compulsory to be quite creative in not giving biases for a specific direction of negative points or specific things that are not as they should be in reality, and also to be result-oriented. Here it's a diagram speaking about how the indicators for results could be, let's say, imagined, starting from the resources which are necessary to make the list of input and also to describe the list of activity. The result can take the form of the output, outcome, and expected impact. Right now we are speaking about the planning stage, which is undertaking, having in mind the desired impact, and also considering that implementation begins from the left side flow to the right one. The analysis of the problem is somewhere in the upper part of these figures. Why? Because it depends on the main objective of this transfer. What is its aim to be realized or to be achieved in terms of results from this process transfer. And some indication of some stages. We will begin with ex-ante analysis, going through planning, management of the resources, in which the human resources are quite important, communication and undertaking of the process. And here is a list of the main stages within this phase. For example, in the ex-ante analysis, as I said, assimilating the good practices feature from the partner, starting from what was happening in the past, so making this kind of documentation and data gathering stage. Then designing the level of implementation, if this is supposed to be very local or to affect the whole region, and also to give estimate to the resources. All kinds of resources, from human resources, personnel, consultant, finance, equipment, venues, time, and so on. For the planning stage, as I said, the analysis of the stakeholders, of the flows, information flows. This also dependent on the current legislative framework which works in the implementing region, to identify the financial resources and make the allocation for the budget. And the last stages, which is still under, let's say, construction. So our intention is to design a survey in which the recipient partners should, let's say, answer some question, giving feedback on this result which is expected, but starting from the origin country in which the instrument was developed. So if you have some indication for us, it will be very useful. And thank you.